Let's look at Chapter 12 of the Core Pesticide Training Manual, Professional Conduct. After studying this chapter, you should know how to recognize when a certified applicator must be present during an application from information provided on the label or by regulations. Understand the importance of keeping records of pesticide training for uncertified individuals. Assure that an uncertified individual that you supervise can understand and follow application procedures. Understand the importance of providing detailed guidance for pesticide applications that you supervise. Know your responsibilities in supervising uncertified individuals. Understand the importance of explaining appropriate federal and state laws and regulations to uncertified individuals that you supervise. Know how to communicate with customers and explain realistic expectations of pesticide applications. Know how to describe notification procedures for customers and neighbors prior to applications, e.g., chemical sensitivity registries, restricted entry instructions, post-application requirements. Know how to provide labels and material safety data sheets upon request. Know how to provide notification and signage required by laws and regulations for the durations of restrictions. Know how to address or refer public inquiries about pest and pesticide applications. I just want to take a moment to mention that professional conduct is a huge part of your job as a pesticide applicator. It doesn't matter if you're a supervisor or a technician, the way you conduct yourself is very important. And this is also going to mean communication. If you're a certified applicator or certified operator, how you communicate with your employees is going to be very important. Also, any certified operator, certified applicator, or even technicians are also going to need to understand how important it is on how you communicate with customers. You've got to set the expectations. You have to be the professional. If you don't set the expectations with customers on what they can expect, you're going to have a lot of problems throughout your pesticide career. So make sure you work on a high level of professionalism, you understand your products, and you understand the communication you need with customers. Webster's Dictionary defines professionalism as the conduct, aims, or qualities that characterize or mark a profession or a professional person. Many factors have an influence on the professional conduct of pesticide applicators. It is important that certified pesticide applicators understand the rules and regulations on supervising uncertified employees and how to train employees in proper pest control techniques. And I wanted to stop here for just a moment and talk about becoming a certified applicator. Some states will also call this a certified operator, so don't be confused between the two. They typically are going to mean the same thing. But the bottom line is, before you can become a certified applicator, you're typically going to need some experience. Now, I've seen this as short as 30 days in some states, but typically it's anywhere between 1 and 3 years. So you need to understand your specific state laws on this, because you're usually going to have to take state exams that are going to qualify you to become a certified applicator. You also need to understand, as a certified applicator, you're taking on a lot of responsibility. You're basically going to be in charge of pest control activities a lot of times in this position, so everybody's going to be looking up to you. So make sure you understand the federal laws, the state laws, and make sure you're ready to lead a team of people to go out and do the right things every day. Implementing proper training and pesticide security measures assists the pesticide application business in establishing and maintaining a professional image. People are quite concerned about the safety and health effects associated with pesticides. Therefore, it is extremely important to be able to communicate with customers effectively, accurately, and in a professional manner about the nature of the pest problem, the chemical and non-chemical means to prevent and control pests, and the risk involved if a pesticide is used. And now we are going to get to the topic of supervision. Unless otherwise prescribed by its labeling, a pesticide shall be considered to be applied under the direct supervision of a certified applicator if it is applied by a competent person acting under the instructions and control of a certified applicator who is available if and when needed, even though such certified applicator is not physically present at the time and the place the pesticide is applied. This comes from FIFRA, Section 2E4. Remember, the certified applicator is in charge of pest control. That's because the certified applicator has the training and skills required to train uncertified individuals. As a certified applicator, you must make sure you provide training to uncertified individuals. As an uncertified individual, make sure you pay close attention to your certified applicator and obtain the knowledge you need to continue to grow your career. There's a lot of responsibility here on both sides. Once again, as a certified applicator, you're in charge. You have to develop the training, the procedures, and protocols to train your team. Not only are you in charge, but you're going to be responsible for them, and you have to make sure that they're out there doing applications correctly to keep themselves and the public safe. As an uncertified individual, you have to understand that that certified applicator, that is the person that you're going to listen to. That is the person that's going to train you. And if you don't follow what they're telling you and pay close attention, as we talked about here, you're going to go out there and you're going to misapply products, or you're not going to wear the correct PPE, or you're going to do something wrong because you just don't have the knowledge yet to be in the position to make all the decisions on your own. I understand as an uncertified individual, you're always going to be making decisions. Just make sure you're following what your certified applicator teaches you and trains you to do. This section in FIFRA establishes the minimum federal standard for direct supervision of uncertified individuals. Some states require a certified applicator to be physically present at the application site whenever an uncertified individual applies a restricted use pesticide. Some states require the certified applicator to perform the application, while other states require the certified applicator to be present during the application of any pesticide, i.e., both restricted use and unclassified use. The supervising certified applicator is responsible for the actions of the uncertified person throughout the entire application process, i.e., mixing, application cleanup, and disposal. In some cases, product labels may restrict the use of certain pesticides to certified applicators only. In such instances, an uncertified applicator may assist the certified person, but the actual application must be performed by the person certified in the appropriate pest control category. Just remember this, that supervising certified applicator is the one going to be responsible for those actions of the uncertified person. So just make sure as a certified applicator you're training your people correctly, and you're also monitoring their applications to make sure they're following the label and the law. The phrase, under the direct supervision of, means the act or process whereby the handling and application of a pesticide is made by a competent person, acting under the instructions and control of a certified applicator. The key words are competent person. In this context, competency is defined as being properly qualified to perform functions associated with a pesticide application. Now, when we think about a properly qualified, competent person, you need to know it is essential for supervisors to prepare and train each uncertified person to independently handle and apply pesticides in a reasonable manner. Uncertified applicators need to be every bit as professional as their certified colleagues. It is important that uncertified persons understand basic information such as federal and state pesticide laws and regulations, security and emergency procedures in the event of an incident, the importance of carefully following all label instructions, Knowledge about the pesticides and application equipment to be used and the pests to be controlled, the proper use of all personal protective equipment, the need to keep accurate and precise application records, the need to communicate regularly with the certified supervisor. Proper supervision is not merely a single instructional event, but rather a continuing education process. Maintaining good training records helps to assure management that training throughout the employee's career is timely and relevant. Supervision requires continual interaction between the supervisor and the uncertified person. And let's just say at this point, you have to remember these training records are really important. They're going to help you comply with federal and state laws, but also the employee's career is tied to the supervision. So make sure that interaction is continual between that certified supervisor and the uncertified person. That's going to be very important for that uncertified person to grow and get the knowledge and skills they need to go further in their career. Let's talk about pesticide security and supervision. Pesticide security has the mission of protecting people, facilities, and the environment from harm. In pesticide certification and training, pesticide security is about allowing access to pesticides only by competent persons. Pesticide security is important for all pesticide distributors, retailers, and end users, including uncertified individuals. Supervisors, as well as those persons being supervised, must be knowledgeable about security procedures. And I have to tell each and every one of you, talking about security of pesticides is going to be a really big deal throughout your career, and those of you taking exams in the core categories are going to see questions about these security procedures. You're also going to see things like this where you need to develop a written security plan that includes well-defined communication procedures between the supervisor and the applicator. Given the ability of today's modern communication technologies, such as cell phones, pagers, and remote internet access, maintaining frequent contact between the certified applicator and the uncertified staff need not be a problem. Such technologies permit immediate contact. No pesticide applicator, certified or uncertified, should be without such communication devices today. So we understand we're going to need a written security plan that includes well-defined communication, and that's going to be between the supervisor and the applicator, as we talked about here. Obviously, everybody has a cell phone nowadays, so just make sure you're staying in touch with each other. As we keep talking about, that certified supervisor and the uncertified applicators need to make sure they stay in touch, because whether we're dealing with security or anything to do with the applications themselves, communication is going to be the key. And as you can see in the image on the screen, we're showing the certified supervisor on the left and the uncertified person on the right. You can see how they have a smile on their face. The point we're making here is make sure you have good and open communication. Make sure you treat each other with respect, and make sure that you don't give anybody the impression that they can't call you. If you get to the point where there's animosity between the supervisor and the uncertified person, it's only going to lead to issues out there in the field. Let's talk about public and customer communications. The importance of professionalism to a successful business cannot be overstated. A professional person or company must strive for excellence. Professionalism deals not only with how you and your equipment look, but also with how you deal with other employees, customers, the public, and in some cases the media. This can all be summed up as your professional image. We've been talking a lot about relationships here and how you conduct yourself. Just remember, how you look, how you dress is a really big part of this. How your equipment looks is a big part of this. If you go out in clothes that look unkept, look unwashed, or you're wearing something with stains all over it, it's not going to be a good image. At the same point, if your equipment has pesticides all over it, maybe you were pouring some pesticide concentrate in a tank and some of it splashed out and it dried up on the outside of the tank, That's not going to look good to the public. So just make sure that you're presenting yourself in the correct way, and make sure when dealing with other employees, customers, and even the public and the media, make sure you have your professional image on. If you don't, it's only going to lead to a bad name for you and a bad reputation for the company itself. This professionalism includes continuing education, keeping up with current pesticide regulations, knowing enough to ask for outside help when you do not have all the answers, knowing the safety and environmental aspects of the job, and taking the initiative to communicate with your customers. What the public hears from the receptionist, technician, and pesticide applicator helps form their opinion of the company as much as do the final results. And this just kind of sums up professionalism. You got to keep up with the continuing education, you got to know when to ask for help, and you have to communicate well with the public because they are judging you on your communication and your knowledge and the whole 9 yards of how you interact with them as a whole. Pesticide applicators must never give their customers or other members of the public the impression the pesticide products they use are safe, or imply the products or services they offer are safer than those used by other companies. Creating a professional image begins with the vocabulary used by employees. It is important to use terminology about pests and pesticides the public can understand. Never use phrases such as environmentally friendly, safe for children and pets, safer, and harmless when referring to pesticide products or to the services offered by a pesticide applicator. Just keep this in mind, especially those of you that are taking core exams. You're not ever going to be able to say a product is safe because the reality is anything that ends in the word side does mean death. CIDE, side, that suffix does mean death. So the reality is the products are not going to be safe. You just have to come up with good terminology for your customers to understand. We're using these products in the safest way possible. We're doing our best to protect you and your family, but you can't use these terms as we just talked about here because that would be going against federal law. Also, avoid using the terms organic, natural, or least toxic because these terms lack a common definition and are likely to confuse your customers. Pesticide applicators must not refer to EPA and state registered products as EPA approved or state approved. Such references can give the public the impression no risk are associated with the use of the pesticide products, and these agencies endorse, approve, or recommend the use of particular products. Don't say, "We only use EPA approved products." Even though it's true, it is still misleading. Acceptable terminology may include describing the product as reduced risk and/or less toxic. Explain to the customer why the risk is reduced when compared with the use of a higher toxicity product. Also explain whether the product requires more applications to be as effective. Provide customers information packets that explain the risk associated with the pesticide. This may include additional information from labels or MSDS, now called SDS, or safety data sheets. This leads us to a great question. What does a safety data sheet look like? I want to take a few minutes and show you what a safety data sheet looks like. In this case, we're looking at a product made by BASF. This is a safety data sheet for Termidor SC, termiticide insecticide. Now this is going to be a very common product used in the pest control industry. You can see the revision date on this is April 30th of 2015. As we look further down this safety data sheet, you're going to see 1. Identification. Product identifier used on the label. Termidor SC, termiticide insecticide. Recommended use of the chemical and restriction on use. Recommended use insecticide. The recommended use identified for this product is provided solely to comply with a federal requirement and is not part of the seller's published specification. The terms of this safety data sheet SDS do not create or infer any warranty, express or implied, including by incorporation into or reference into the seller's sales agreement. Next, we have the details of the supplier of the safety data sheet. The company is going to be BASF Corporation, 100 Park Avenue, Florham Park, New Jersey, 07932 USA. Their telephone number is 973-245-6000. Emergency telephone number, Chemtrag, 1-800-424-9300, or the BASF hotline, 1-800-832-HELP, or 4357. And you need to understand the contact information on the safety data sheet would really come into play if somebody was injured or poisoned from the product. So you need to keep these numbers handy on any product you have. You need these numbers available because they can be helpful as an emergency contact to make sure you do the right things when treating an individual that's been exposed to the product. Next, on our label, we have other means of identification. We have the substance number, the EPA registration number, molecular formula, chemical family. The substance number on this product is 256709. The EPA registration number is 7969-210. The molecular formula is C12H4Ci2F6N4OS. The chemical family is phenylpyrazole, and the synonyms are fipronil. In our next section of the SDS sheet on the Thermador SC insecticide termiticide label, we're going to have Section 2, Hazards Identification. According to Regulation 2012 OSHA Hazard Communication Standard 29 CFR Part 1910.1200, classification of the product. The acute toxicity is a 4, inhalation vapor for acute toxicity, acute toxicity 4 for oral acute toxicity. Let's take a moment real quick to talk about one thing we just mentioned. How Category 4 toxicity is determined. Chemicals are assigned a Category 4 based on acute toxicity data from animal studies. Various international accepted test methods are used to determine the dose or concentration that causes severe adverse effects after a single exposure. The key parameters for Category 4 toxicity are LD50, which is going to be the dose that kills 50% of exposed animals from a single exposure, LC50, the concentration in air that kills 50% of exposed animals from a single exposure. The criteria for Category 4 toxicity are: we'll start with talking about the exposure route, the toxicity, and the criteria. For instance, we've got an exposure route of oral ingestion, and this would be an LD50 greater than 50 kilograms of body weight. We have an exposure route of dermal, skin contact. This would be an LD50 greater than 200 kilograms of body weight. We have an exposure route of inhalation gases. This would be an LC50 greater than 100 ppm V4H. We have an exposure route inhalation vapors. LC50 would have to be greater than 0.5 milligrams liters 4H, and we have an exposure route inhalation dust and mist. LC50 greater than 0.05 milligrams liters 4H. As with all products, we need to know the signal word. The signal word for Thermador SC insecticide termiticide is warning. This information will always be on the safety data sheet as well as the label. On the next section of the safety data sheet, we're going to have the hazard statement. As you can see here, for Thermador SC insecticide termiticide, we have a code of H332, which means harmful if inhaled. We also have a code H302, harmful if swallowed, and finally, we have a hazard statement code of H373, may cause damage to organs through prolonged or repeated exposure. And we're not telling you this to scare you about the products, but you need to understand, just like all the other things we've talked about on the safety data sheet, this is letting you know what the hazard statement is for this product and that it is harmful if swallowed. It is harmful if inhaled, and the fact that it can even cause damage to organs through prolonged or repeated exposure. The biggest thing I can tell you is you're always going to want to wear the correct PPE. If you're wearing that PPE, you shouldn't have to worry about the prolonged or repeated exposure. If you don't, then you could have some of the problems we're talking about here. Now, we're also going to have precautionary statements on the SDS sheets. This would be prevention. We would have codes like P271, use only outdoors in a well-ventilated area. P261, avoid breathing vapors. P260, do not breathe dust, gas, mist, or vapors. P264, wash with plenty of water and soap thoroughly after handling. P270, do not eat, drink, or smoke when using this product. So keep in mind, a lot of these things are important. They are precautionary statements that you do need to follow, and you just need to understand what the risks are and what you can do to prevent that. We talked about PPE before, but again, when we see a code like P271, use only outdoors in a well-ventilated area, we know that we can't use this product indoors. So understand the SDS sheets as well as the label on all of this, and make sure you're taking the correct precautions through precautionary statements like these. As we look further into the Thermador SC insecticide termiticide label, we're going to see precautionary statements, response. So in this case, we're going to be looking at the response if you have an issue with the product. We have a code of P312, which is call a poison center or doctor, physician if you feel unwell. P304 plus P340, if inhaled, remove person to fresh air and keep comfortable for breathing. We have P314, give medical advice, attention if you feel unwell, and P330, rinse mouth. Once again, this is if somebody's been poisoned. What is the response steps we need to take? This is showing you what those response steps are to make sure that you get the medical treatment you need, as well as make the right decisions before that medical treatment can be given to the person that's been exposed. Our next section of the SDS sheet is the emergency overview. Caution: harmful if swallowed, harmful if absorbed through skin, harmful if inhaled, causes eye irritation, do not get in eyes, on skin, or on clothing, do not breathe vapors, mist, wash thoroughly after handling. Once again, we're looking here and understanding what the cautions are of this product. Harmful if swallowed, harmful if absorbed through skin, harmful if inhaled. The fact that the product can cause eye irritation, so you do not want to get it in your eyes, on skin, or on clothing. And this again is covered up above, but we just need to understand, what do I not want to do with this product? You also don't want to breathe it, which makes sense with a lot of products, but again, not every product's the same. But with this product particularly, you don't want to breathe the vapors or the mist. And anytime you handle this product, you need to wash thoroughly after handling, as it says here. Let's look at section 3, composition, information on ingredients. According to Regulation 2012, OSHA Hazard Communication Standard 29 CFR Part 1910.1200. Due to time constraints in this course, I'm only going to give you the CAS number, the content percent, and the chemical name of the active ingredient of this product. The CAS number is 120068-37-3. The content is 9.1%, and the chemical name is fipronil. So those of you that have used Thermador SC insecticide termiticide, you would totally understand this. You would understand the content percentage, and you would understand that the chemical name or the active ingredient is fipronil. 4. First aid measures. Description of first aid measures. General advice. First aid providers should wear personal protective equipment to prevent exposure, remove contaminated clothing, move person to fresh air. If person is not breathing, call 911 or ambulance, then give artificial respiration, preferably mouth to mouth if possible. Call a poison control center or physician for treatment advice. Have the product container or label with you when calling a poison control center or doctor or going for treatment. Again, with our description of first aid measures, if inhaled, remove the affected individual into fresh air and keep the person calm. And I just want you to understand, those of you that are going to be taking core exams, you need to know a lot of times this is exactly what you're going to do with a product. If somebody's inhaled a product, you're going to remove the affected individual into fresh air and keep the person calm. I'm not trying to tell you that's going to be the same thing with every product, but that's a pretty good rule to follow. Just make sure you read the label and or SDS sheet to confirm that's what you need to do. But this is an exam question I've seen in a lot of states, and the reality is you typically always want to move the person into fresh air. Again, looking at first aid measures, description of first aid measures. If on skin, rinse immediately with plenty of water for 15 to 20 minutes. Now, I'm going to say a fair number of you have probably used a product like Termador SC insecticide termiticide, so when you see something like this, it probably really opens up your eyes. The reality is you would never think you would need to rinse yourself with plenty of water for 15 to 20 minutes if you got this product on your skin, but you have to because that's what the SDS sheet says here, and it would say something very similar on the label. So just keep in mind all the knowledge you're gaining by looking at these SDS sheets. On our final slide with first aid measures, description of first aid measures, if the product's in your eyes, hold eyes open and rinse slowly and gently with water for 15 to 20 minutes. Remove contact lenses, if present, after first 5 minutes, then continue rinsing. If swallowed, never induce vomiting or give anything by mouth if the victim is unconscious or having convulsions. Do not induce vomiting. Have person sip a glass of water if able to swallow. Always communicate to customers the risk associated with a pesticide and provide them with additional information. And what we're talking about here on how we communicate with customers and how we always need to, when we talk about the risk associated with pesticides and provide them with that additional information, a lot of times this is knowledge you have. This is why I'm pushing the education so much, because you do need to understand the products you're working with. Also, that's why we talk so much about the SDS sheets, because in reality, you're not going to remember everything. But when you have access to that SDS sheet and the label, and you can provide that to a customer, that's a great way to communicate the risk associated with pesticides. It is important for pesticide applicators and pest management specialists to spend time with each customer, explaining what needs to be done and why. Show customers how environmental, cultural, and physical factors can contribute to ongoing pest problems. Once again, it's your job as a pest management specialist to set the expectations with customers while also educating them. So as we can see here, the guy's talking about the use of a crack and crevice tool on a vacuum cleaner. The point being made is they only know the expectations you set and how you educate them on what you're going to be doing and why you're going to be doing it. For example, moisture, humidity, planting site, sanitation, improper plant selection, and ineffective barriers all may play a role in pest outbreaks. Do not merely tell the customer what you are spraying for, but rather show the customer the problems. Defining the what and why includes explaining product selection, how it is used, and anticipated results. As you can see here at the bottom right, explain how plants growing against the structure and moisture from watering can give ants harborage and access. One other thought on this slide. As you can see here, we have those plants growing against the structure. This is giving a superhighway for ants to enter the structure, especially when we consider not only do they have the plant to crawl up, but obviously it's being watered, so there's always a moisture source in that area. The reality is, if we don't explain and set the expectations with the homeowner that this needs to be corrected, we're never going to effectively solve that ant problem. And even if we're never going to effectively solve that ant problem because we're not taking a look and doing what we need to treat the source itself. Be factual and, above all, do not exaggerate the results your customer can expect from the treatment. Inform the customer about any post-application label instructions, such as re-entry restrictions, watering in a pesticide, or livestock grazing or feeding prohibitions, whether in the field, the garden, or a structure. Some states have mandatory pre-application notification requirements for customers or neighbors. These include chemical hypersensitivity registries currently enforced in about a dozen states. Be sure to let your customers know if the neighbors have requested notification and if there are any concerns or objections involving the use of pesticides. At a minimum, prior notification to concerned individuals shall include 1. Date and address of the scheduled application. 2. Name and telephone number of the applicator. 3. The applicator's certification, license number, where applicable. State laws and regulations may differ from these minimum notification requirements. Therefore, pesticide applicators must know what their state-specific notification requirements are before making an application. So just keep in mind, any of you that are dealing with people on the pesticide notification registry, which is what I call it, each state might call it something a little bit different, you're just going to have to make sure you understand who has to be notified, how they have to be notified, and when they have to be notified. If not, this can cause a major problem for you, especially if one of these people see you doing an application and they've not been notified. I'm going to say your state's probably going to come down on you pretty hard at that point. I'm going to say the state's probably going to be having a conversation with you at that point. Regulations in some states may require you to provide copies of labels and SDS at time of application. Such requirements usually involve applications around residential, school, and recreational property, but rarely agricultural areas. States and other governmental entities may also require posting of the treated site immediately following a pesticide application, especially when the application is made to residential and golf course turf, landscape areas, ornamental plants, school property, or public access areas, or around the perimeter of structures. A number of states now have school integrated pest management, IPM programs that require notification of school staff members and parents and posting of treated areas. Even in states where these requirements do not exist, companies often post notices at entry points to recently treated areas. This usually involves placing a small plastic flag or sign in a conspicuous place to alert people to avoid the treated area, at least until the spray is dried thoroughly. Check with your state, tribe, territory, or other pesticide regulatory agency to make sure you are in compliance with any posting requirements. To maintain good customer and public communications, consider keeping more detailed records than required by federal and state laws. Records can prove invaluable as documentation in the event of a complaint or a lawsuit against your business. Pesticide records provide all the necessary information about the pesticides and how they were actually applied, thus protecting the applicator from what may be false accusations. Additional information could include weather, nozzle sizes, spray pressures, ground speed, calibration, or any other special precautions that may have been used or taken. Records can also help determine which pesticide treatments work, which treatments do not work, and why. Record keeping is also a major tool of IPM by documenting pest sightings and population levels, pest control techniques used, and overall environmental conditions. Good records enable an applicator to make more informed pest control decisions. If medical treatment for a pesticide injury is required for humans or animals, records can provide information necessary to the medical staff for diagnosis and treatment. Good records can also document the steps that were taken to protect farm workers and the environment from pesticides. Records may also be used to respond to the public's concern regarding pesticide use. How to answer customer questions. Today, customers and other concerned individuals are likely to ask the pesticide applicator, the sales representative, or the service technician about the products that will be used to manage their pest problems. They may ask about possible effects on children, pets, property, the environment, and themselves. How you answer these questions can determine whether you have a satisfied customer. Preparing yourself and your staff to answer consumer concerns is the professional approach. A good way to familiarize every pesticide applicator and technician in the company with typical questions and answers is to discuss these during company training sessions. Role-playing by the staff members can help reinforce correct and responsible responses. If requested by the customer or anyone else inquiring about pesticides, provide web addresses and 800 phone numbers for pesticide emergencies and for pesticide information. For emergencies, contact the National Poison Control Center at 1-800-222-1222. For pesticide information, contact the National Pesticide Information Center, NPIC, at 1-800-858-7378 or at the website you see on the screen. Also, when requested by your customer or other concerned individuals, be prepared to provide the trade and common names of the pesticides and copies of the product labels and MSDS, SDS sheets. Your professional image. It takes work to achieve and maintain a professional image. As a representative of your pest management company, seek to reinforce a positive company image. Remember, your work actions reflect on your company and the entire pest management industry. Be sure to leave a positive impression. Our next section is going to be on training and education. You know, when I think about training and education, one of the words that comes to mind is school. Most all of you remember being in school and having to go every day and learn things that you really didn't get to choose if you wanted to learn or not. You had to take math, you had to take science, you had to take a lot of these different subjects, and at the end of the day, some of them you liked, some of them you didn't. Strangely enough, as you're probably seeing now, all these subjects kind of working together for you in your career. So I want to talk about training and education on a different level. I want you to understand why training and education is going to be so important for your professional image. If you think about it, in reality, the only way you're going to grow in anything in your life is learning more about it. So when we look at that professional image as it relates to training and education, you're not going to be able to go out there and carry yourself as a solid professional in any industry if you don't get the required training. So we're going to talk about in the next few slides some of the steps that can get you where you want to go when it comes to training and education in the pesticide industry. Now, you've already made a big step taking this training today. Today you're taking a core training. So as you probably know, there's a National Core Pesticide Applicator Manual. It's a really big manual with a lot of chapters. We're just going over one of those chapters today, but the point is that you've started your training in core pesticide use and handling. This is very important. No matter what category of pest control you do, you're going to need to understand core pesticide handling and use. And that's why that's a great place to start. So we're going to talk about the different categories of training you may need to get, and this is going to be based on what type of job you're going to be doing. Some of you are going to do pest control work. Some of you may do termite work. Some of you may do right-of-way work on the sides of roads. Any way you look at it, the bottom line is you're going to need some of that category-specific training, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we go. As we think about it with category-specific training, an easy one to start with would be general pest control. Now, general pest control can mean a few different things, but a lot of times those of you training that will be working in general pest control will be working in structural pest control. So what you need to do first and foremost is check with the state that you'll be working in and make sure the specific training and exams you need to take to become certified in pest control. Now, I'm saying certified because at the end of the day, every state's got a different term for it. Some people will call it registered, some people will call it certified. You have to understand what the different categories are in your state and what you need to do to get yourself legal to go out and applicate with pesticides. Now, I want to talk about general pest control just a little bit more because this typically will involve things like controlling ants, spiders, and roaches. That's why we're calling it general pest control. So just keep in mind you need to understand not just the category specifics, you also need to understand this category covers these insects. I can tell you in some states mosquito control is covered under general pest control. In other states you have to have a separate mosquito control license. These are the types of things you need to figure out as you're going through your studies, what the state laws are and what the categories are. But at least we understand on a simple level, general pest control is generally going to be your general insects as we're showing here. Now, a second common category you may need to look for training on would be WDO or termite control. This would stand for wood destroying organisms. Sometimes states will call them WDI, wood destroying insects. This is another common category in pest control. A lot of you out there are going to go into the termite control business. You may even be doing pest control and termite control as well. A lot of times when you start as a technician, you'll specialize in one or the other. But in reality, in this industry, a lot of us end up working in every category. So just keep in mind that WDO or wood destroying organisms category is going to be another big one you're going to want specific training in. When you look at this category, there's a lot of different things involved. If you're dealing with something like subterranean termites, you're dealing with a whole different animal than dealing with ants, spiders, or roaches in that general category. You're going to need to understand math really well. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier about some of the subjects you learned a lot about in school are going to come into play in this industry. You have to understand how much termiticide to put out. You're going to need to be able to calculate things like the linear footage of a structure, the square footage of a structure. If you don't calculate these things, you're never going to be able to go out and do treatments for wood destroying organisms and termites. So I just want you to understand math is going to be a big part of this, and you need to understand the specifics in that training. Now, I can tell you there's training available everywhere. Most every state has a university that's involved in training. As you can see here, I've trained over 125 hours of materials in category-specific training myself. So there's a lot of different things out there. Just make sure you're getting good and correct training and make sure it's category-specific because, as I said here, they're all going to be a little bit different. When it comes to category-specific training, another one of the big three categories is going to be lawn and ornamental. A lot of you are going to work in the lawn and ornamental industries throughout your pesticide career. This is a whole different set of challenges and opportunities. Obviously, making somebody's lawn look good can be a really big job. It can also be really rewarding. You're also going to need to understand there's a lot of ins and outs when it comes to lawn and ornamental treatments. It doesn't just involve putting out weed killer or putting out herbicides, things like that. People also are going to be involved in what happens with their lawns. What I mean by that is they have to be cut correctly, they have to be watered correctly. There's a lot of things out of your control that you can't do as a lawn and ornamental professional. So I want you to understand there's going to be a lot of customer communication in the lawn and ornamental side of the business, and if you don't work hand in hand with the customers, you're going to have a lot of problems. This again relates to your professional image. When it comes to lawn and ornamental, communication is paramount, working hand in hand with that customer to make sure they don't cut the grass too short. If their grass is cut too short, it's really going to kill the new growth. You're not going to be able to do enough to it from your side to make it look good. At the same point in time, you don't want the grass to be too high. Once again, this can help facilitate weed growth and things like that. Also, you don't want it to be over or under watered. So if that grass doesn't have enough water, what's going to happen? It's going to burn up. Whereas if it gets too much water, it can get root rot and things like that. So when we deal with the lawn and ornamental category, it's just very important for you to understand. This is much different than killing something. A lot of times we're trying to keep something alive. I've found throughout my years in the industry, lawn and ornamental can be one of the most challenging categories, and once again, can be one of the most rewarding, because when you do see beautiful lawns and ornamentals, and you know you're the one taking care of them, it makes you feel good about what you're doing. I would also want you to understand, when you're doing lawn and ornamental treatments, you're dealing with a lot of product, as in you may have trucks with 500 gallons of product that you're driving down the road. So just think about that. You need to be super careful how you drive, what you do out there. When you're driving a big truck like a lawn and ornamental truck with that type of weight and that type of product in the bag, you've got a lot of responsibility. Number one, you have to understand, you have to stop a lot quicker. That 500 gallons of product you may have in the back is going to push you, even when you're pushing on those brakes, it's going to push that truck a little bit further before you're able to stop. The other part of lawn and ornamental is that these products, because you will be putting them out at a high level, you'll be outputting a lot of product, you have to make sure you're wearing the correct PPE. You have to make sure that when you go out and you spray a lawn and you put out 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 gallons of product, that you're not absorbing that product. But also, and this goes back to showing yourself as a professional, you have to make sure you explain to the homeowners or the property owners the product you've put out. You have to make them aware of any restricted re-entry intervals where they have to stay out away from the product. What I mean by that is, when can they walk on the lawn again? How long do they need to stay off? What other types of concerns are there about the application? This is especially important in lawn and ornamental, because when you go out and you do a full lawn treatment on somebody's lawn, how easy is it for them to let their dog out or their kids out, somebody to get out on that lawn and come into contact with the product? And of course, as I just said, they're not going to be wearing any PPE. And if you don't explain those restricted entry intervals, they're going to have no idea when they can go back on that lawn. So a lot of times in almost any state, and even by label, you're going to have to post on that lawn when the treatment was done and when people are allowed back onto that grass or onto that property. Also with lawn and ornamental, a lot of calculations are involved. So we're dealing with square footage regularly in lawn and ornamental treatments. The problem is that not every lawn's square, or not every area we treat is going to be square. You're going to learn a lot of math if you work in the lawn and ornamental side of the business. You're going to have to understand rectangles, you're going to have to understand triangles, you're going to have to understand circular areas and how to calculate them. I'm not going to go through all that today. I'm just making this point to you that math is going to be paramount to anybody doing lawn and ornamental treatments, and especially because you're going to be putting out so much of the product. It's really easy to put the environment at risk, put the people around you, pets, animals, whatever, at risk, as well as yourself. And this is why it's so important as part of your professional image that you're able to do these types of treatments correctly. And the last thing you would ever want to do is put somebody at risk because you didn't do things properly. Summary. Certified applicators often supervise and instruct uncertified individuals. The minimum standard for supervision of pesticide applicators is detailed under FIFRA. According to FIFRA, certified applicators do not necessarily have to be physically present during the application. Certified applicators, however, must be aware of any state or label requirements that have stricter standards. To perform pesticide applications properly, uncertified individuals need adequate training and supervision to become competent at their task. Supervisors must be able to communicate effectively with employees as well as customers and the public. Both certified and uncertified employees must be able to address consumer questions clearly and accurately. It is a violation of the federal pesticide law to misrepresent the safety and efficacy of any pesticide. Applicators must also be aware of and follow up on any pre-application notification or posting of treatment sites required by their state. Properly training employees, enforcing security procedures, communicating effectively, and adhering to federal and state pesticide laws all contribute to a professional image. Looking and acting professional enhances consumer confidence in the pest management industry. I just want to close out by saying this. Everything we do and how we carry ourselves every day is part of our professional image. We've talked about it throughout this course, the fact that you need to be able to communicate internally between management and employees, as well as externally with customers with respect, empathy, and understanding their particular situation. So make sure you go out there, you carry yourself professionally, and let's put a great image out there for the pest management industry. Congratulations, you have completed the course. Please proceed to the exam to receive your credit.